I didn't expect much when I signed up for the sleep study. Honestly, I just needed the money. My name's Ryan. I'm 24, living in Chicago, and between gigs after a freelance contract fell through. When the research department at the university hospital emailed me offering $600 for 3 nights of monitored sleep, I didn't hesitate. Show up, wear some wires, get paid. Seemed simple enough. What they didn't mention in the sign-up email was that I'd be sharing the room. I walked into the sleep lab around 8 p.m. the first night. The place looked more like a hotel than a hospital. Neutral beige walls, polished floors, soft lighting. A nurse checked my ID and gave me a wristband like I was checking into a music festival, then pointed me to room B. When I stepped inside, there he was. The other guy was already sitting on the edge of one of the twin beds. His hair was a little messy, dark and thick, like he ran his hands through it a lot. He had headphones hanging around his neck and a notebook open in his lap. Looked up when I came in and gave me a small nod. "Hey." His voice was low and even, calm in a way that felt practiced. Like he didn't talk just to fill space. "Hey," I said, dropping my duffel bag on the empty bed. "I'm Ryan, Eli." He went back to scribbling something down in his notebook while I unpacked. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to make conversation or just let it be, so I stayed quiet. The whole setup was kind of awkward. 2 twin beds, maybe 6 feet apart, a camera in the ceiling, and machines in the corner that looked like they were pulled straight out of a sci-fi movie. A nurse came in a few minutes later and explained the rules. Lights out at 10, no phones, no talking after 9:30, and they'd be hooking us up to biometric monitors after we changed into our sleep clothes. After she left, Eli finally spoke again. "You done one of these before?" I shook my head. "First time. You?" He nodded. "Third. They're testing REM cycles under different ambient conditions, like room temperature, background noise, melatonin dosage, that kind of stuff." He said it like he worked here. Like he wasn't just some other random broke guy who needed a few $100. "You a student or something?" "Used to be. Dropped out of med school." "Damn," I said before I could stop myself. He half smiled at that, but didn't explain. Instead, he stood up, stretched, and walked to the tiny private bathroom in the corner to change. I tried not to stare, but he was tall, taller than he looked sitting down, and lean in the kind of way that suggested he didn't work out, but somehow still had abs. He came back wearing soft black joggers and a plain white tee, no socks. The nurse returned around 9:30 and started hooking us up to the equipment. Little sticky pads on our temples, wires down our arms, sensors clipped to our fingers. It took maybe 15 minutes total, and then the room lights dimmed automatically. I slid under the covers and tried to get comfortable. The silence was weird. It wasn't like sleeping at home. No faint hum of the fridge or traffic from outside, just sterile, total stillness. I could hear the machines clicking softly every few seconds, syncing our vitals or whatever they were tracking. And then, out of nowhere, Eli's voice cut through the quiet. "You talk in your sleep?" I blinked into the dark. Not that I know of. Why?" "No reason." There was a pause. "Do you?" I asked. "Sometimes." That was it. No explanation, just that. I turned toward the wall and closed my eyes. At some point, I drifted off. I'm not sure what time it was when I woke up. The room was still dark, but something felt different. Off. The air felt heavy, like the pressure had shifted, and then I realized it. Eli wasn't in his bed. At first, I thought maybe I was dreaming. You know that groggy, middle-of-the-night haze where your brain's still catching up? That's where I was. But then I turned my head, just slightly, and saw that Eli's bed was empty. The covers were pulled back. The faint red glow from one of the monitors showed the shape of his pillow, still sunken like he'd just left it. I didn't move. I just listened. There was a soft rustle. Then footsteps, barefoot, slow. My pulse jumped, but I kept my breathing steady, eyes half closed. The sound stopped near my bed. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe he got up to go to the bathroom and just hadn't gone back yet. Maybe he was sleepwalking. I didn't want to overreact. Then I felt it. The lightest shift in the mattress. Not like someone climbing in. More like someone just leaning. A pause. then the faintest pressure on the blanket near my hip. I could feel the weight of his hand. Just resting there, not moving, not even gripping. My heart was going nuts now. I didn't know what the hell was going on. But I didn't move. Couldn't. His voice, quiet, like he wasn't sure if he was speaking out loud. "You awake?" I swallowed. "Just barely." "Yeah." He didn't say anything for a second. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to freak you out." "You're, I turned my head, finally facing him. He was standing beside my bed, just barely visible in the darkness. "You okay?" He exhaled, soft, almost embarrassed. "Couldn't sleep." That was all he said, but he didn't move away. "I don't usually... it's weird, right?" he added. "Two strangers in a room. You're supposed to act like the other person doesn't exist. But it's a little much tonight." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get it." Still, he lingered. His hand lifted slightly, like he wasn't sure whether to pull it back or do something else. I could feel the air shift where his fingers hovered near the blanket. "You ever get that thing?" he said suddenly, voice low and fast, "where you wake up and feel like you're supposed to do something, even if you don't know what?" I blinked at him. "Sometimes." He looked down. "It's like that." I couldn't stop thinking. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to sit up, to ask him more. But another part of me, the part that noticed the way his voice softened when he talked to me, or the way he wasn't wearing socks and his toes curled against the tile floor like he was nervous, just stayed still. He stood there for another second. Then, without asking, he sat down at the edge of my bed. Not all the way. Just enough that I felt the shift in weight again. His back was to me. Neither of us spoke. I watched the slow rise and fall of his shoulders. The white t-shirt clung to his body, creased from sleep. I noticed how his fingers tapped lightly on his knee like he was thinking hard about something, or maybe trying to keep himself grounded. "You really don't talk in your sleep?" he asked again. "No. Why?" Eli let out a soft chuckle. "You were breathing real fast earlier. I thought maybe you were dreaming something intense." "Maybe I was," I said. I meant it as a joke, but the way he turned, just enough for his face to be visible in the dim light, made my throat dry up. His eyes found mine. Neither of us looked away. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Just two strangers in a half-lit room pretending they didn't feel what was happening between them. Then he said, quieter than before, "Can I stay here for a minute?" My chest tightened. "Yeah," I said. I didn't even have to think about it. He shifted, pulled his legs up gently so he wasn't sitting at the edge anymore, but closer. His back was still to me. I could feel the warmth of him through the thin blankets. He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. Eventually, I drifted off again, with the weight of someone else's presence on the bed beside me. When I woke up the next morning, the bed beside me was empty again. For a second, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, that maybe I'd dreamed Eli sitting beside me, talking in the dark, sharing that weird moment between sleep and whatever the hell we'd slipped into. But then I noticed the indentation where he'd been, and the fact that his blanket was a little messier than before, like he'd gotten up in a rush. I sat up slowly. My wires were still attached, but one had come loose from my collarbone and was dangling near the sheets. My mouth was dry, my brain foggy. In that way it always is after dreaming too vividly. The room was quiet. I glanced over at Eli's bed. The pillow was still indented from his head. His notebook was gone. A nurse knocked once before opening the door. "Morning?" she chirped in that overly cheerful voice people use when they know you just woke up. "We'll get you both unhooked in a sec. Eli's in the restroom." I nodded, trying to act casual. Cool, but the rest of that morning was weird. Not in an obvious way, but just off. Eli came back in, already dressed, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. His hair was still a little damp from the quick shower they offered in the hallway. He barely looked at me as the nurse came in to remove our wires and sensors. No mention of the night before. Just a quiet, polite, almost clinical vibe. I thought maybe he regretted it. Whatever it had been. I left the sleep lab around 8:30, back into the overcast Chicago morning. My phone buzzed with a couple of emails and a Venmo notification. $200. Deposited. That should have made me happy, but instead, I just walked home with this dull hum in my chest, like I'd missed something I wasn't even sure had been real. That day I tried not to think about him. I worked on my resume, I cleaned my kitchen, I called my sister back, finally. But Eli kept showing up in the corners of my brain, the way he'd asked to sit beside me, the way his voice had dropped when he asked if he could stay, the warmth of him in the bed, barely there, but enough to keep me awake with questions. That night I came back for night 2, same room, same beds, same rules. He was already there again. This time, lying on top of his bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I walked in, then back at his screen. "Hey," he said, "flat?" I nodded. "Hey." I wanted to ask if we were going to talk about last night, but I didn't know how. I didn't even know what I wanted him to say. We went through the same routine. Wires, sensors, nurse with clipboard. She left at 9:30 again, reminding us not to talk after lights out. Once she was gone, Eli sat up in bed and finally looked at me. "So about last night." I froze a little. Not visibly, I don't think, but inside, yeah. Every nerve was suddenly on high alert. "What about it?" "I wasn't trying to be weird," he said quickly. Sometimes I get in my head at night. It helps to not be alone." I nodded slowly. "It's fine. You weren't weird." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to fall asleep like that." "You didn't," I said. "You left before morning." He blinked at me, like that surprised him. "Right." Silence settled again. Then, softer. "You mind if I sit with you again tonight?" I stared at him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. "I mean, yeah, if it helps you sleep." He nodded once, like that was all he needed. And just like the night before, when the lights dimmed and the machine started humming quietly, he slipped out of his bed and crossed the room. This time, he didn't sit. He lay down beside me, not under the blanket, just on top of it, close enough that I could feel his elbow brush mine. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. The seconds passed slowly. My heartbeat settled into something steady, almost calm. For a long time, we just lay there, side by side, staring at the ceiling. Then, quietly, he whispered, "I sleep better near someone. Don't know why." I turned my head toward him. "Did you do this with the last people?" He shook his head. "No." There was a beat. "Why me?" His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I don't know yet." I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was uncomfortable. Far from it. If anything, I was too aware of how calm I felt, which made it impossible to shut my brain off. Eli was next to me again, his shoulder just brushing mine through the blanket. He was lying flat on his back, hands folded on his stomach like he was trying to keep himself from fidgeting. I could hear his breathing, steady and slow. Every so often, his fingers would twitch, like he was fighting the urge to move or speak. I wanted to ask a million questions, but none of them felt right. Not then. Not in that dark room with just the hum of the monitors and the distant whoosh of the air vents. Eventually, he turned his head toward me. "You still awake?" "Yeah." Another pause. Then, "You ever feel like you're more yourself when nobody's watching?" I let out a breath. "We're literally on camera right now," he chuckled, low and tired. "I know. I mean, when nobody knows you. Like, when you're with a stranger, and there's no expectations. No past to live up to." I looked over at him. His eyes were open now, staring at the ceiling again. "Yeah," I said. "That's kind of the only time I ever feel like myself." He didn't respond right away, just nodded slightly, like he knew exactly what I meant. "That's why I like this," he said softly. "Not just the money or the science part. I like the quiet, the blank slate of it." "And laying next to me," I added, testing the water. He didn't look over, just said, "Yeah, that too." I turned onto my side, propping my head up a little. He stayed flat, unmoving. "You don't know me, though," I said. "You don't know if I'm some serial snorer or a sleep farter or whatever. Don't care, he replied. You feel calm. That's rare for me. I swallowed, unsure what to do with the warmth crawling up my neck. There was something so disarming about how casually he said it. Not flirtatious. Not shy. Just honest. And maybe that's what made it hit harder. We didn't say much else that night. Just lay there, inching a little closer without meaning to. By the time I finally drifted off, our arms were nearly touching, and I could feel the body heat coming off him like a low burn. In the morning, he was gone again. Not out of the room, but back in his own bed, sitting up, scrolling his phone like nothing had happened. The nurse came in, made her usual cheerful rounds, and unhooked us without comment. He looked at me once as I got dressed, his eyes flicking up, then down. You sleep okay? Yeah, I said, better than usual. He nodded but didn't smile. I couldn't tell if he was holding something back or just trying not to break the rhythm we'd somehow slipped into. We left the clinic together that day, walking in silence down the hallway to the elevator. When the doors opened, he turned to me. Tonight's the last one, he said. Yeah. You staying after they unhook us tomorrow? I shook my head. I've got work. Why? He paused. No reason. The elevator opened onto the lobby. He stepped out first, then turned slightly like he wasn't sure if he should keep going or wait for me. See you tonight? I nodded. Yeah. Then he gave me that half smile again, the one I hadn't seen since the first night, and walked out the sliding doors. The third night felt different before it even started. I don't know if it was the fact that it was the last night, or if something between us had quietly shifted. Maybe both. But when I walked into room B, Eli wasn't on his bed this time. He was sitting in the chair by the window, looking out into the dusk. His hoodie was unzipped, revealing a fitted black t-shirt, and he looked more thoughtful than usual, like he'd been sitting there for a while. He glanced over when I came in. You made it. Thought about bailing, I said lightly, but I figured you'd get lonely without me. He smiled, just for a second. You'd miss it. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and looked around like I hadn't seen the room twice before. There was a strange, nervous energy building in my chest, like I was waiting for something to happen but didn't know what. When the nurse came in, neither of us said much. She did her usual thing. Sensors, wires, light warnings, and left with a cheerful, "Sleep well, guys." The door clicked shut behind her. I was about to get into bed when Eli said, "Wait." I turned. He stood up slowly and nodded toward his side of the room. "Come here a sec." I hesitated, then crossed over. He gestured to sit next to him on the edge of his bed. When I did, he shifted to face me, his knee bumping mine lightly. "You said you feel more like yourself with strangers," he said quietly. I nodded, watching his face carefully. "I've been thinking about that," he continued. "About how sometimes it's easier to be honest with someone who doesn't know your story. Someone who won't use it against you later." I nodded again, slower this time. "Yeah?" He looked down at his hands. "I didn't just drop out of med school," he said. "I got kicked out." That surprised me. He'd never said more than a sentence about it, and I hadn't wanted to pry. "Oh." He didn't explain right away, just took a breath, let it out, and added, "It wasn't academic. It was other stuff." I didn't push him, just let the silence hang for a few seconds. He looked up at me finally. "You're not going to ask?" "You'll tell me if you want to." That made something soften in his expression. "I crossed the line with someone I wasn't supposed to," he said finally. "And when it got out, I didn't deny it, didn't lie. Just let it fall apart." "Was it a professor or something?" "No," he said. "A guy." That caught me off guard, but not in the way he probably expected. More like the realization that he'd been carrying that around in silence this whole time. "I thought you might be straight," I said before I could stop myself. He gave me a crooked smile. "Everyone does. I don't really correct them." We sat there in silence again. Then he said, "I haven't been close to anyone since. Not really." I looked at him, heart thudding. "And this feels close?" He met my eyes. "Yeah." Doesn't it to you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached out and put my hand lightly over his. His fingers tightened around mine. We sat like that for a moment, just breathing. Then I said, "So are you sleeping in my bed again tonight?" Eli gave the smallest smile. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." "Kinda hoping you would." He stood up slowly and nodded toward my side. "Let's go before the camera sees us talking." We crossed the room in silence, but this time, it wasn't awkward. When we lay down, he didn't stay on top of the blanket. He climbed in beside me, turned onto his side, and settled in like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then, finally, his hand found mine under the sheets. No more words, no hesitation, just heat and breath and two people who stopped pretending they were strangers. I don't think either of us slept much that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because it felt like if we blinked too long, the moment might slip away. Eli's hand stayed in mine, loose but steady. At some point, he turned closer to me, and I could feel the warmth of his chest brushing my arm. His breath was soft against my neck. Neither of us dared to speak, like talking would shatter the strange little world we'd built under the glow of hospital lights and the hum of machines. I didn't want to move. I didn't want it to end. I kept expecting him to pull back, or laugh it off, or say something that would break the spell. But he didn't. He just stayed there, body curved toward mine, legs gently brushing under the blanket. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't even overtly romantic. It was something in between. Something quiet and unspoken. Something real. Around 2 a.m., I felt him shift a little. "You okay?" I whispered. His voice came back, low. "Yeah. You sure?" He hesitated. "I'm just not used to this." "This?" "Wanting something. And not hiding it." I swallowed. "You don't have to hide with me." He didn't answer, but he let out a breath that felt like relief. I turned onto my side to face him. His eyes were open. In the faint light, I could see the crease between his brows, the slight tension in his jaw, like he was still fighting something inside himself. So I reached up and touched his face. Lightly. My fingers barely skimmed his cheek. He didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned into it. He closed his eyes, just for a second, and I felt his whole body exhale against mine. "I wish I met you somewhere else," he said quietly. "Why?" He opened his eyes. "Because this place feels like a dream, like none of it will matter when we walk out tomorrow." I thought about that. Then I said, "Or maybe that's why it does matter." We didn't kiss. I didn't want to rush it, and neither did he. But the space between us got smaller. Our foreheads touched for a moment. His thumb traced the inside of my wrist. My hand stayed on his chest, feeling the slow thump of his heartbeat like it was syncing with mine. Eventually, we both drifted off. It was the deepest, calmest sleep I'd had in years. When I woke up, the morning light was bleeding through the curtains. I could hear the nurse knocking softly on the door. But Eli didn't move. He was still there, arm draped over my waist, his face tucked near my shoulder. I stayed still as long as I could. The door opened, and the nurse froze when she saw us. "Oh," she said quickly, voice unsure. Just here to start the unhooking process." Eli stirred, groggy and slow, but didn't react much. He blinked at the nurse, then at me, and to my surprise, he didn't pull away. He just gave my side a small squeeze before sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he muttered. "Morning," I replied, my voice thick with sleep. The nurse moved around the room a little awkwardly after that, but didn't say anything else. We sat in silence as she peeled off the monitors, coils of wires falling into a basket. She left us a clipboard to sign out, then disappeared with an awkward smile. When we were finally alone again, Eli looked over at me. "So, now what?" I stretched, my body still warm from the contact. "I have no idea," I said honestly. He reached for his hoodie, pulled it on slowly. "I'm grabbing coffee after this," he said. "You want to come with?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like real-world coffee?" he smirked. Yeah, where strangers go to not be strangers anymore. I sat up, heart thudding in a whole new way. Yeah, I said, I'd like that. We didn't rush out of the building. After 3 nights of strange intimacy wrapped in medical wires and unspoken feelings, we both moved like we were unsure how this would carry over into daylight. I followed Eli down the hospital hallway, past quiet labs and bored-looking interns sipping lukewarm coffee, until we stepped out into the sharp brightness of the real world. The city was waking up, buses groaning along their routes, people hurrying down sidewalks with phones pressed to their ears. It should have felt jarring, like coming out of a trance, but walking beside him I felt oddly grounded, like something had clicked into place. We stopped at a corner cafe, the kind of place that serves everything in glass mugs and overcharges for oat milk. He held the door open for me without thinking, and I followed him inside. While we waited for our drinks, black for him, iced with milk for me, we stood at the pickup counter, in a silence that felt surprisingly comfortable. I didn't sleep with anyone for 2 years, Eli said suddenly. I blinked. Okay. He looked at me, eyes steady. Not because I didn't want to, I just didn't trust myself. I kept replaying how everything fell apart, how easily I let someone in, how quickly it blew up. After that, I started convincing myself I wasn't worth the risk. My hand brushed his as we both reached for a sugar packet at the same time. And now? I asked. I don't know, he said. You're not what I expected. Thanks, I said, raising an eyebrow. He smiled. I didn't think I'd feel this safe. This quickly. I wanted to say something clever, something reassuring. But all I managed was, I didn't think anyone would ever crawl into my bed during a sleep study and not be a total creep. He laughed into his coffee. Yeah, that could have gone so badly. We sat by the window, legs stretched out under a tiny table, sipping in silence for a while. Then he said it, so casually I almost missed it. You want to do this again sometime? Sleep together in a clinical setting? He rolled his eyes. Coffee, a date. I don't know. I grinned. Yeah, I'd like that. He relaxed then, shoulders easing back into his hoodie. I could see the tension lift from his face, like something had finally exhaled inside him. We talked for a long time after that. About everything. Where we were from, what we wanted to do, why he left med school, why I was freelancing. None of it felt forced. None of it felt like an interrogation. It was just 2 people discovering each other in the morning light, without wires or clipboards or nurses watching from a hallway. When we finally left the cafe, he walked me to the train. Before I stepped onto the platform, he reached for my hand again. You gonna call me? He asked, that slight smirk tugging at his mouth. I'll text you first, I said. So you don't freak out? He laughed. Fair. I leaned in and kissed him then. Not hard, not dramatic. Just a soft, real kiss that felt like a full circle. A simple yes to everything we hadn't said in the dark. When I pulled back, he was smiling. I was really just looking for rent money, I said. Yeah, he said, and I was just looking for sleep. Neither of us got what we came for. We got something better.